I'm going to start things off with a tip that you should already know by now. Most people have caught on, but just in case you haven't, I want to include this one in here because it is that important. I will try to expand on it a little as well. You can access vehicle storage directly from your base. There's a drop-down menu above your inventory, and you can transfer items from your vehicles directly into your base's storage. This is especially useful with buggies because hauling all those goods inside would be an absolute pain, and the vehicle storage doesn't count in remote crafting. And it's not just a storage unit. Anything with storage has this option. You can put it directly into refineries, since some of them have higher storage capacities than those small storage units. You can transfer between buggies or vehicles by first going into a storage and then back into the other one for easier organization. And the opposite, you can move it into a buggy and then into another storage unit if you're trying to organize a little bit more. One more way to get the most out of this is to use all those free vehicles that you find as bonus storage. Storage units are expensive and very limited space-wise. There are free sand bikes and buggies all over you can find. They're usually barely drivable, but you might find one near your base, either a sand bike or a buggy. Pick one up, craft an inventory for it, and you have yourself additional free storage. Obviously, the buggy is going to be way more beneficial with that 1,500 volumes of storage. But if you think about the cost of that inventory compared to the cost of a storage unit, it's not that different. And if you're looking at those aluminum storage units, those are crazy expensive. So if you can find yourself a free buggy, this will give you some much cheaper storage. There's one more tip here I want to share with you that will save a ton of time. So you can actually use your subfief console to quickly distribute your power cells. So let's say you farm a bunch with your buggy, which you should do because it gets so many. You can go ahead and just put those in your storage. And then if you go to your subfief and hit Y, it will automatically distribute all the power cells in your storages evenly to all your generators. So let's say you have some that are half full, some that are really full. Whatever you have in your storages, it will evenly distribute it. So no longer do you have to go to each and every single generator just to see how much is left and splitting things and try to make sure everything is perfectly even. All you have to do is hold Y and will automatically distribute those evenly. So all your generators will now be equal. So this is obviously a priority. Let's make this as easy as possible. You'll need a lot of steel and a good bit of cobalt paste. About 180 steel and 98 cobalt paste, or 900 iron ore, 720 carbon ore, and 300 erythrite. You'll need other things too, but I assume you have those resources locked down already, except maybe water, but we'll talk about that in another section. You'll likely have a base set up in Vermilius Gap and have the means to farm iron. Good news for you, you don't have to move your base to a carbon-rich area. Carbon is fairly light. You can load up a sand bike Mark II inventory and bring back over 1,000 in one trip. That's more than what you'll need. Also, the erythrite you need isn't overly heavy. You can get enough for all your beginning buggy parts in one trip with the sand bike Mark II inventory. A stack of 500 iron ore weighs 150. Carbon weighs 100. A stack of aluminum, 300. And erythrite, 200. Let's say your base is all the way down here, in the southern part of the Vermilius Gap. You are better off making the couple trips needed north than spending time building a whole new base closer to carbon, because eventually you will need to move that base again further north once you do get your buggy because of aluminum. So don't focus too much on establishing a steel farming base or a carbon ore farming base, or even an erythrite farming base. Those things can all be gotten with one trip. The iron will be the biggest need, so save time and just use whatever base you are using now to get your buggy crafted. Then make the move as needed toward more aluminum after you get it crafted. You'll also want to load up on erythrite so you can get your Mark III cut array, which will allow you to hand farm aluminum. You will have to do this in order to get the Mark IV buggy cut array. Your first buggy cut array cannot farm aluminum, and you need it to. So it's extra important to get a full load of erythrite, but still only one trip is needed if you're doing it smart. So the ideal progression here is 1. Use your current Vermilius Gap base to farm iron ore. You'll need about 900 ore total for all buggy parts. another 160 for the vehicle fabricator, and 60 more for the next cut array. Number 2, venture into the closest bordered area with carbon nodes. Bring your Sandbike Inventory Mark II with 250 volumes of storage. That will give you at least 1,000 carbon ores. You need about 720 for the full buggy. Fill it up for that little extra needed for the cut array as well. Number 3, travel to the Rift to get Aerythrite. You can also do this with your Mark II. This will be a long trip, but you only need to do it once. Load up your Sandbike with all the Aerythrite you can. You need 300 for the buggy, but you'll want to get that full stack because you'll need the other 30 for the Mark III cut array and 50 for the next buggy cut array. So get that full stack of 500. 4, craft your buggy. The water demands shouldn't be too much, but obviously you'll have to invest a little bit into that as well. We'll talk more about water in the next section. 5, you'll want to farm another 125 steel ingots while you're still in that area for your medium ore refinery. 6, farm another 15 steel ingots for your Mark III cut array. And 7, craft that medium ore refinery. Then pack up your base and move closer to aluminum. After you craft your buggy, you can make your move to a new location, but getting those 125 steel ingots for the medium ore refinery will just save you another trip back this way. So I recommend farming steel until you get that crafted, then you can make your move. Also, you will need that Mark III cut array to get your first aluminum, so it's another smart thing to get before you leave the iron-rich location. So if you haven't done this yet because the buggy seems like a little bit of a grind, but you're already crafting other steel things, stop everything else you are doing and start focusing on your buggy. It saves so much time using it to farm everything, including more steel. The biggest thing you need to focus on after getting that buggy though is your medium ore refinery. It is expensive, but it's very important because it will save you even more resources. It uses fewer resources to craft things, and that really adds up. Once you have your buggy, you should look to move closer to an aluminum-rich location. Aluminum tier becomes even more grindy in the sense that things get more expensive, and you'll need a lot of it for the aluminum tier and the duraluminum tier. It's also heavier, so your life will be a lot easier if you stay close to aluminum-rich locations. There are a ton of steel things to craft, and you might see this and think you need to spend a lot of time grinding steel, the iron ore and the carbon ore, so you might be tempted to build up a base near the carbon-rich areas. But like I mentioned, carbon is light, and it slowly becomes less useful after you get all those steel tier structures crafted. You might continue on needing steel for things like the death still, but a simple 10-minute trip from your aluminum base can yield more than enough for things that you might need occasionally in the future. The same thing goes for Aerythrite. You can make one trip with the buggy and load up enough to keep you full for quite some time. Eventually, you'll need to make more trips over there, but until you get into that later tier, cobalt paste is primarily used for your Ornithopter. Aluminum is the heaviest and most needed, so you'll want to find a spot that prioritizes that. Getting the most central location isn't needed either, and you probably won't be able to anyways, because other people will probably already be built up on those meta spots. Here are a couple really good locations though that will have rich aluminum deposits and a short drive to get all the iron, carbon, and Aerythrite you need. Progression should look something like this. 1. Prioritize crafting your buggy, medium ore refinery, and Mark III cut array at your current Vermilius Gap base. There's no need to move as long as you are close to current iron nodes. Once you have those, consider crafting expensive steel items like your advanced fabricators while you are still in the steel-rich area. This step isn't needed, but if you don't have a lot of stuff to move, you might as well craft them now while you're already in the steel-rich area, saving you a trip in the future to come back. 3. Load up your base or set out to build a new one in one of these aluminum-rich locations. 4. Use your Mark III cut array to farm the minimum amount of aluminum, which is 490 aluminum. 5. Craft your Mark IV buggy cut array immediately so that you can now farm aluminum with your buggy and get significantly more steel as well. 6. Plan your routes back to get steel if you need it and a route for Aerythrite in the future. The whole idea behind this is to save you time. so you don't fall into the trap of moving your base to be closer to a iron-rich location, then moving it again to be closer to carbon, then moving it again to be closer to erythrite. Aluminum is the biggest burden, and if you prioritize that and plan for the future, you will save yourself a ton of time moving all your stuff, multiple times. It's worth the occasional trips back for steel as you need it, because this aluminum spot can serve you up to the end game. If you do want multiple bases, say one for aluminum farming, one for iron and carbon farming, and so on, keep this in mind. Hauling those resources back and forth can get time consuming without an ornithopter. I suggest having one central location until you can get that ornithopter. Even if you do have a base specifically for iron, you have to get there with your buggy anyway, so in my opinion it works better early on to just have one central base, until you have a better way to haul all those resources from one to the other. Water strategies. By the time you craft steel, you'll start to realize the need for water in crafting. That takes a big jump in aluminum tier. You need a lot more. It's important to have that situated so you don't get bottlenecked every time you want to craft something. Most people are going to tell you the Fremen Death still is the best way to get water. I'm here to tell you that might not be true for solo players. First, let's go over what that is. You unlock this during the 8th trial of Vakul. If you've been skipping these missions, you'll want to for sure check them out and continue them. You'll unlock the Thumper, the Still Tent, and in the 8th and final one, this thing, the Fremen Death Still. You can collect bodies from downed enemies and store them for exsanguination. The process takes 1 hour and yields 25,000 milliliters of water. That's a great yield for a mostly passive form of water. The problem with these is the setup. It's the infrastructure. They are expensive. The actual still itself costs 60 steel ingots. Now that you have a buggy, that might not seem like a lot, but just 3 of them is the same amount of steel as your entire buggy. The real issue is the power cost though, significantly more than any other structure at this point, costing 200 power. Each regular generator only produces 75, and each wind generator only produces 150. So until you level up your generators even more, which gets expensive, having multiple death stills for the solo player gets very power intensive. The death still is a must though, and it's something that you will want to unlock as soon as you can. But to expect to rely mostly on that early on, it's a little unrealistic. This is something that will require a lot of time to properly set up the infrastructure. If you already have a huge base with tons of space for generators, mountains of steel to craft rows of death stills, and more power generators than you could possibly need, then sure, go ahead, get started setting this up. But for most of you, it's a grind that's totally unnecessary, because in the short term and more immediate, water gains can be matched by the power of the scythe. You've probably used the Dew Reaper. It's very effective and useful, but in the aluminum tier, that takes a massive jump. The scythe yields significantly more and has a large field, so it gets everything faster. The only downside to the scythe is that you have to manually farm water. I think that's a turnoff for most people, and I think that's why so many people are so adamant about the death still, because it's passive. But if you just take 10 minutes of manual farming, you will have all the water you need for major crafting at this stage, without overloading your base's power supply. The main thing is planning a route, or building near a big group of dew plants. Find 10 or so patches of plants that you can farm each night. This will be the biggest limiting factor for this method. If you are in a spot that requires a lot of travel, it's obviously not as effective, but maybe it takes you 15 minutes instead of 10. Still better than the 1 hour you have to wait for the death still. This is my own personal route, and it yields me a lot of water in just 10 minutes. Not even 10 minutes. I timed it, and in just 6 minutes, I got 60,000 milliliters of water. 6 minutes. If you're telling me you can't spend 6 minutes farming something manually, you shouldn't be playing a survival game. I do have some planetology skills to bump this up, which I'll remind you in another section, but you can expect similar results if you upgrade to the scythe. To pair with this, you'll want the decal leader John for the 10,000 milliliters of space, but you really don't need it. I only use 1 or 2 of these because they can get pretty expensive. But anyway, I just run back to my base and empty it out with the few regular ones that I do have. Then I just go back out and get the rest. This could be done in one trip, but because my base is close enough, I didn't feel the need to waste resources on more of these leader johns. You'll have to make those determinations based on how far your base is from your due route. How many trips do you need to make back and forth, and how many leader johns do you need to craft? So what about the other methods? You've been using blood purifiers likely as well up to this point. This method also begins to fade away, but it's still something you can and should definitely be using. Since you are already going to be in combat, it doesn't hurt every now and then to fill up those blood bags. I wouldn't spend the time going out and farming blood like you used to, but if you are already fighting people, it is an extra thing to help you out. Getting the higher tier blood extractor isn't essential either. It gives you more blood per body, but it's not as if bodies aren't everywhere. So you can save your resources on that one, since the blood extracting is no longer your primary source for water. And the wind traps? Well, they just aren't as useful as the other methods. Mostly because they are expensive. Passive water generation doesn't hurt, but that 90 ingots per trap would probably be better used in making more death stills and the generators to support it. But having one or two can help in a pinch, just to make sure you always have that little bit of extra water on hand. So with all that, here is a progression and recap. 1. Finish your Trials of Akil to unlock the death still. 2. Craft at least one of them, but put up more if you have the available resources on hand. Just don't spend too much time building out a massive infrastructure for it. 3. Craft your scythe and plan out a due route. 4. Every hour, reload your death stills. 5. And every night, hit up your due route. 6. Every time in combat, get a little extra blood, but don't go out of your way to do it. And 7. Build up a couple wind traps for emergency backup, but don't rely on it as a main source. With just the scythe and the death still, you'll have more than enough water to carry you into the next tier. What's also nice about the death still is that if your water storage is full, it will just pause it. So it doesn't hurt to constantly have these going. That way, when you do run out of water, more blood will be waiting to automatically be converted. You can also store bodies in storage units, so have one next to your stills with a bunch of corpses you can exsanguinate later. Slowly add to your infrastructure more and more death stills, and eventually you'll be able to phase out the dew scythe. Mostly. But early on, it's going to be essential to use it to make sure you don't slow down and have to wait for the death still each time. And also, so you don't have to spend hours building out this massive infrastructure right from the start. Now that you got your buggy, let's focus on getting that Ornithopter. Hopefully, you've followed the previous strategies and your base is well equipped to farm lots of aluminum and water, because you'll need both. Approximately 57,000 milliliters of water and 241 aluminum ingots, or 1,700 aluminum ore. Same as before, you likely have most of the resources figured out, so let's talk about the ones that are harder to get or more grindy. Firstly, the water. We just talked about it. You can get all you need, honestly, with the scythe, but let's utilize the passive methods. Fill up your death still while you go grind the resources. You'll only need 2, and then a little bit extra on top of that. But if you only have the 1, that's okay. Just make sure it's going while you go out and farm other things. The aluminum is straightforward. That is why you built here in this aluminum-rich area, because you need so much of it. That is also why you upgraded your buggy's cut array so that you could actually farm it with your buggy instead of by hand. Farm yourself 1,700 ore, or rather just fill up your buggy. At the starter 1,500 volumes, you should be able to get enough with one full load. And if you are in an aluminum-rich area, that won't be a problem. For the cobalt paste, we already know how to get that from getting our buggy. You have 2 options here. You need a lot of cobalt paste for the future, but you don't need a ton for the Ornithopter. Like before, you can take your sand bike, Mark II inventory, and fill it up with enough. About 300 to get that 82 cobalt paste you'll need. It'll be faster, obviously, taking your sand bike, but you'll likely be waiting for aluminum to craft anyways. I recommend just making your buggy trip down to the rift and loading up. You will stock up for a long time this way and not need to craft an Ornithopter inventory and go farm more later that way, at least not for a while. But if you want to save a slow trip, you can just use your sand bike for now and get more than you need in one trip with the Mark II inventory. The diamondine dust and carbide scraps are a super rare resource, and they're only rare because there's 2 places you can get them from, but they respawn on a regular basis like everything else. Fortunately, you don't need a lot, but to make sure you only need 1 trip, make sure you get every chest. More than that, make sure you get the special chest. That alone will give you most of what you need. This location isn't too far of a trip, but it's going to be a frustrating one if you have to do it multiple times. These enemies are tough, but you won't need to fight them. You can simply run through one time and get what you need. And then you'll have your final pieces to your Ornithopter as long as you get every chest that you can. You only need 14 diamondine dust and 7 carbide scraps, so keep an eye on how much you are picking up. Alternatively, if you can't make it in one trip, this is the only other location that you can get these from, besides a vendor. So to recap, start up 2 death stills, or bring Leader Johns with you to Scythe when nightfall hits. 2, farm a Buggy's inventory full of aluminum while waiting for those death stills. 3, start crafting aluminum. This will take some time. 4, make a trip to farm 300 minimum erythrites using either your buggy or your sand bike. 5, check your water supplies when you're back. Farm more with your scythe if you can and it's night. And make sure your aluminum is continuing to produce. You may have had to wait a little bit for more water to fill back up, so just make sure that refinery is constantly running. 6, then head to Mesa Tyrol and get your diamondine dust and carbide scraps. 7, come back, check on your waters, farm more if needed, and just keep making sure that aluminum is continuing to craft. Like I said, this will take a lot of time, so you want it to be going at all times while you're doing other stuff. And number 8, craft that cobalt paste. And besides continuing to wait for that aluminum to finish up, you should have everything else you need. It's easier said than done. It takes a lot of travel to get to those locations, but following these steps will make sure that you aren't doing these things over and over. Instead of 5 trips to get aluminum, you should only need 1. 1 trip to get all the erythrite you need. 1 trip to get the diamondine dust and carbide scraps. The travel time is the most time-consuming thing without an Ornithopter, so save yourself some time, plan things out a little, and make sure you only need 1 trip to get each of these resources. Planetologist. Don't forget about Derek. Let's serve this as a reminder. Good old Derek Chinar is sitting in his garden, welcoming any and all into the world of planetology. You either unlocked this right at the start, or you didn't. But you should definitely go and do this. And if you haven't yet, you should definitely unlock at least the level 2. If you do have time, go to level 3. So you might have put this off because there are some way cooler skills out there, but this skill tree is absolutely essential for, well, anyone, but especially solo players. What you may not have noticed about these skills are that they are actually passives, meaning you don't need to swap them in and out to have them be useful, which makes these benefits maybe the most important skill tree early on because so much of the game at this point is PvE focused. You'll have better mining, better dew gathering, better compacting, more fuel efficient driving. There are so many skills here to unlock that can save you so much time and resources. And it doesn't take much time to do these quests, like I said. It's not just the resources either, there's just great value throughout this whole skill tree. And if you are deep into the PvE aspect, you don't need to worry so much about spending all these points right now on a whole bunch of different combat builds. By all means, you do what you want, but having these skills unlocked will help you get to that end game a lot more efficiently. Do not sleep on this skill tree. Sometimes you get stuck, and there's nothing worse than having a fresh built vehicle that you spend hours grinding only to realize that you may have to abandon it and do that all over. It's always helpful to carry your welding torch with you. Don't forget you can always disassemble a vehicle and reassemble it elsewhere. This may not always work in its entirety. I'm showing a clean wedge, but sometimes you can clip into a wall and you might not have access to parts. But always give your welding torch a try and remove the parts. Even if you can't get all the parts, it will save you a lot of work having to regrind an entire vehicle that is stuck. Fortunately for me, I was able to get everything out in this situation, even with an inventory full of aluminum. The inventory simply drops in the ground and I can pick it all back up and put it back in after assembly. This disassemble reassembling method is also a good way to transport your buggy. Since it cannot be scooped up with the vehicle backup tool, you can use this method to travel a good distance quickly. Assemble it somewhere you need to use it and make the drive back, saving you the lengthy drive for at least one way. A good use case for this is when you have to get your Aerythrite. Sandbike and or suspensor belt your way to the rift, assemble your buggy, and then drive back home. It will cut your trip down by a good amount. Or for those really long distances across the map that you may need, it's a good way to cut that trip time in half. I also still use this for situations where I want to do a monster amount of steel farming. Even after being an aluminum tier, I needed a bunch of steel for death stills, so I went out to an iron rich spot, assembled my vehicle, and I got as much as I could carry to make the long trip back to my base, saving me a good deal of time getting there. Obviously, this becomes even better when you have an Ornithopter to go one way, but it's still effective with a sandbike. The one thing to remember is disassembly empties the gas tank, so be sure to have extra fuel.